My name is Stephanie Lott. I'm with the City of Austin's Watershed Protection Department, and we are here to talk about this Williamson Creek Tributary 4 that we are working on a project to stabilize the channel. So what our plan is for tonight is in a moment, I'm going to introduce some key people we have here tonight. Then we're going to give you just a little bit of background about the Watershed Protection Department, because we find that some people don't know anything about us, and some background on the project. And then we're going to walk through what the issues are with the Turtle Creek and some of the ideas we're having for how to fix those issues. So let's get started on some of the introductions. So we have Clayton West here. He is an engineer with the Watershed Protection Department. He's going to be giving the background information. We also have Javi Gonzalez. He is with the Public Works Department, and he is managing the project for us. And then our consulting engineers on this project is Fries and Nichols, and Jay Scanlon and George Fowler are the engineers that are working on it, and they are going to walk you through the problems and the solutions. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Clayton.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good evening. As Stephanie introduced me, I'm Clayton West, an engineer with the Watershed Protection Department. I've worked in this group for about 7 years. So within the department, our group primarily focuses on repairing and restoring streams that have been damaged by erosion. But I want to give a quick background on our overall department, because like Stephanie mentioned, a lot of times folks aren't too familiar with our department, maybe can confuse it with the Austin Water Department. But anyways, we are the Watershed Protection Department, and our department's mission is to protect the lives, the property, and the environment of Austin, primarily by reducing the impacts of flooding, major flooding, erosion in the streams and rivers through Austin, and water quality pollution in the streams and rivers of Austin. And all these impacts to the lives, the property, and the environment kind of can be boiled down to they stem from, or they're made worse by development, urbanization. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of kind of giving some context for our mission, where that comes from, what urbanization is. So urbanization, you could think of it also as like land development. It's adding impervious cover, which is hard roads, asphalt, concrete, parking lots, buildings, etc. Converting a natural landscape into a developed landscape with a lot more hard impervious cover, and that has several key impacts to the way that water moves through that landscape. And primarily it reduces greatly the ability of the ground to absorb the rain that falls on it. And following from that, when it does rain a lot, as it often does in Central Texas, that water doesn't go into the ground, it quickly runs off into the streams. And it's often dirtier as well, because whatever debris, pollutants are accumulating on those hard surfaces. Like you could think about oils, sediment, trash, gets washed along with it. So yeah, it increases the amount of water, increases the speed it flows into the streams when it rains, and it's probably dirtier than if it were not developed. So I have a little cartoon that kind of illustrates this. It's a little bit, simplistic, but hopefully it gets the message across. On the left-hand side, you can see a cartoon of what would be a rural landscape. So you have some nice green, meadows, you have some, stream, and this is kind of like a cross section. So the numbers here, when it rains, about half of that is going to be getting infiltrated, which means it's getting absorbed into the ground. And maybe becoming groundwater, maybe percolating out into a stream further down. 40% is going to end up falling on the ground, then evaporating back into the air. And only 10% is going to run off, which means it's going to kind of flow over the land and make it into a stream or a river. Now contrast that to the right-hand side cartoon. It shows an urban environment, kind of more, where there's been that development I was just talking about. And in this case, you get less rainfall infiltrating, only about 32%. You get less rainfall ending up evaporating, and a lot more becomes runoff. Basically, the ground is less absorbent and more runs off. So between these two, I think it's obvious that Austin is more of an urban environment. And I think we're all familiar with this because when it rains a lot in Central Texas, we know that it floods. This is a picture of House Park on Lamar, if you're familiar with that area of town.
Oh, yeah.
2015, 2016, I forget which year exactly it was, but we had those big rains, and Shoal Creek, which runs right along Lamar Fit area, flooded. And this flooding probably would have occurred to some extent had there not been development. But the fact that the Shoal Creek watershed, the whole area of land that drains to Shoal Creek, is quite developed, being one of the older parts of Austin, this flooding was surely made a lot worse by that development. The erosion, that faster moving water, I said it entered the channel more quickly, that has more energy, and that can wash away and transport more of the material around that channel. So these two photos actually are from the channel that we're talking about tonight. We call it Williamson Creek Tributary 4, which means it's a tributary of a smaller stream that drains eventually to the larger stream, Williamson Creek. But I've kind of nicknamed it Turtle Creek because that just sounds nicer. And, the road runs through there in y'all's neighborhood, Turtle Creek. So these are photos of Turtle Creek.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Was part of the reason y'all are doing this because of the big apartment complex that's being built at South First and Turtle Creek?
No,
because that thing's that's a monster, and there used to be a lot of ground cover. There's a big field and stuff there, and now that's gone. So I was just wondering if this was kind of why y'all decided to take care of this problem now or before it got bad.
That's a good question. Actually, there's not a lot of relation to that apartment complex going in. This stream, we've been, as a department, our group has been monitoring it for a number of years.
Okay.
And the way we decide to prioritize our projects, based on how severe the erosion is, et cetera. This creek has been on our short list for a while. And so that development's new, and I'm sure they're complying with all the appropriate regulations.
I don't doubt that. I just think that, that once it's built, there's all that runoff will go into the creek.
Well, the city chopped down a whole bunch of trees right along the creek before this project started. And so I'm sure that contributed to erosion as well.
Yeah. So I'm saying I'm glad y'all are on top of it, because I'd rather have you start working on it before it got, before it got bad.
Sure. Yeah. Good questions.
My name is Nick. I work for the developer of the apartment complex. Just wanted to chime in real quick. We did go through a very extensive review process and revegetation for the 100 feet along Turtle Creek that we do share. So along with that, we also are treating all runoff and water on our site within our pond. So there will be no additional runoff into the creek. I just want to clarify that.
Okay, well, thank you. That's good to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. All right, and just the last slide I have giving an example of the problems that our department's mission is to address is water pollution. Water pollution decreases the quality of the water in our streams. It degrades habitat for wildlife, fish, bugs, other things that are naturally want to be in the riparian or the stream corridor. In Austin, we have a unique environment where we have some endangered species like the Barton Spring salamander, which could be harmed by poor water quality entering into Barton Springs. And water quality, even our drinking water supplies now can be affected by poor water quality coming through our streams. You can think back to October 2018, when we had those big floods in the hill country and all the sediment came through, and And there was a boil water notice. Well, that was because of a water quality issue in the Colorado River. Anyways, I just want to give a background of what our department's mission is and how it, might relate to what we're trying to do in this location. I described flooding, erosion, and water quality as being our three kind of thrusts of what we're trying to do. This project is really focused primarily on addressing an erosion issue. So that stream that flows behind folks' properties, between commercial properties and residential properties, has been eroding severely. That's the primary driver for this project, is to address the erosion, stabilize the creek, and repair it and restore it. There are ancillary benefits to reduce the water quality impact because there will be less sediment leaving the channel and flowing downstream. And as George and Jay will get into, as far as the flooding goes, this project is not going to make the flooding any better or any worse. It's going to be flood neutral, just because there's not a lot that we can do in the channel to address the flooding that's coming from all around. So with that, I was kind of getting into that just now, but just really want to touch on, kind of the issues that this project is looking to address, and then kind of how we're going to do it. Like I said, the creek bottom and banks are eroding in this current channel, the Williamson Creek Tributary 4, aka Turtle Creek. So I'll pass it on now to, will it be Jay or George taking it on now?
This will be Jay, and that's why I am jumping slides on you.
No worries.
Good evening. I'm Jay Scanlon with Friesen Nichols. Okay,
real quick, if you can go back one slide, I just wanted to point out quickly that photo you see on the screen there, that is actually a project that our department has completed in the past few years. We put that in there to kind of just give a visual reference on what this project might look like. And we have some more kind of conceptual graphics later on, but in case folks are wondering. Sorry, George, take it away.
No problem. Thank you, Clayton. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit about the project in the background in a little bit more detail, and then, as Clayton mentioned, we'll do a kind of a virtual walkthrough of the stream. So you guys may not have been down in there and looked at it in detail. So we'll walk down the creek and show you what we're seeing and why the city's focused here. Clayton mentioned the city's been monitoring this site for a number of years. The three reaches that they were particularly focused on were the Eberhardt to Turtle Creek, which is the yellow stream segment in the bottom left. The second is just downstream of Stastny Lane near the AutoZone, which is in the middle of the aerial photo. And the third is from Mockingbird down to South Congress. That's segment 3. Currently, the city has funding to address problem areas 1 and 2, and they're going to combine that into one project. Project area 3 is not currently funded, but will likely be a future project at some point. Last year, we worked with the city and developed a preliminary engineering report. As Clayton mentioned, we'll show you some of the conceptual designs that we have. Big part of looking at the stream last year was not only coming up with the designs, but understanding why the creek was eroding, what the potential and future risks were, so that we could develop a solution that is long-term. The city doesn't want to just put a Band-Aid on there. The designs that we'll show you are engineered channels, but the city has a real heavy focus on preserving and enhancing the stream corridors, their assets, and they want to take advantage of those. And that'll be reflected in what you see. We're just starting to get into the final design, which is why we wanted to reach out and let you guys know we're coming. As we get into that, those conceptual designs will be revised a little bit, and we'll talk about that a little bit. What we'll aim to do is minimize impacts to existing trees and properties, things like that, take advantage of the easements and right-of-way the city has, and develop a channel section that, as Clayton mentioned, won't have any adverse impacts on flooding. It may not have big impacts, but it'll certainly have improved water quality and long-term stability of the stream. The city has developed several conceptual sort of artist versions of the types of work they do. And as you can see, this is not a concrete line ditch that, we would have seen built 40, 50 years ago. To the extent they can, they like to use natural materials on the bottom of the channel, vegetated slopes on the side, and use that to not only create a stable channel, but also provide those additional benefits, the groundwater absorption, development of vegetative corridors that help wildlife, but also water quality. In this version, it's primarily earthen side slopes with the cobble bottom. A version of that they also do is combining the vegetative slopes with limestone block walls. You can see in Clayton's screenshot there, he's got an example of one of their projects in the background, and you can see the limestone block wall behind him. So we'll use that in areas where we have a need for a steep slope, but still want to use native materials. And the third version is a combination of those two, where we might use the limestone blocks or rock at the toe of the slope, and then use the engineered and vegetated slopes to provide the stability. When we looked at Turtle Creek, the conceptual designs, there are portions of it where we have a very narrow corridor and the city doesn't have a lot of land. In those cases, we'll be looking at something similar to what you see on the left side of the screen. So that is the limestone block walls with the cobble bottom. When we do that, we'll preserve what we can above the wall and then look for opportunities to enhance that with native vegetations, grasses, shrubs, trees. And then on the right side, you see that combination similar to the artist renditions where we have the limestone boulder wall on one side, and on the other side, we'll use laid back slopes and vegetation to provide the stability. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to George. He's going to go ahead and do a quick virtual creek walk for you through these corridors.
Thanks, Jay. One of the reasons why we wanted to do a virtual creek walk tonight was because not everyone has the opportunity to walk down the creek or to look over your back fence and understand what's going on at your neighbor's side of the creek a couple houses down. And so we wanted to take this opportunity to walk everyone through our project sites so you can look at what the existing conditions are within the creek. And as we're walking through it, please remember some of the goals the Watershed Protection Department has, which is controlling erosion that may threaten private or public infrastructure. Water quality pollution protection, stopping the sediment from going into the streams, and then also some of the flooding issues and how to prevent flooding, and then also complying with the city's flood damage prevention ordinances. So here we are going to start off at Eberhardt Lane, where on this photo is an aerial photo, and on the upper part is Turtle Creek Boulevard. And then on the southern part of the photo is Eberhardt Lane. We're going to start at Eberhardt Lane and walk our way downstream. So at Eberhardt Lane, we're looking downstream. And here on your left bank, which is where you see the stacked rock wall, that wall has failed. And private land is starting to fail and fall into the creek. Those are examples of where a stream has received too much urbanized rainfall runoff and is moving very quickly when it goes through and erodes the stream bottom and the stream bank, undermining people's retaining walls that protect their homes and native stream banks. As we move further downstream, you can start to see as we get away from that retaining wall, what is left of the native stream banks, where they are steep, where if I were to walk on those, there's a high chance. Even though I'm naturally clumsy, this is going to be a guaranteed fall risk for me falling off a stream bank like this. What happens is when the erosion occurs on the stream bank, it'll remove the material along the stream bank, exposing tree roots. So that process continues over time, and as you'll start to see, those trees will start to lean and then eventually fall over, spanning the channel, which we'll talk to in a moment. Another point that Clayton had mentioned earlier is that when urbanized stream water rushes through our streams, it removes the channel bed bottom. And in the left part of this photo is a utility that's now abandoned, but the stream bed has actually lowered itself several feet and has undermined the utility conduit that's encased in cement there, and that has collapsed. Where the gentleman is in the green jacket to his left is an example of that infrastructure that's been damaged by erosion. The pipe on the right is we believe is an abandoned sewer line. But again, when they installed those sewer lines several decades ago, that would have been under a couple feet of cover that has been eroded away through the process of urbanization. So as we move even further down the stream, you can see the stream has narrowed considerably. It is the bottom of the stream is now down to a couple feet where it was at least 6 to 7 feet wide above. But now you can see this photo is taken looking upstream. If you squint really hard, you can see the culverts at Eberhardt Lane way up in the distance. But those are three trees that have fallen over and now span the channel, which potentially could trap debris and temporarily plug the channel. So these are the kind of problems that the Watershed Protection Department attacks and lists as a priority as their stream stabilization, to look at stabilizing the streams, reducing flood hazards, and also improving the habitat that's there. And if you can imagine yourself being a salamander or a fish, when a big flood comes through, you have no place to run and no place to hide. You're going to get flushed out to the Colorado. So those are the things that we look to achieve in these stabilization techniques. Again, another example of infrastructure that is potentially going to be damaged by erosion. That gentleman standing at the end of a concrete apron that protects a sewer line, I believe. And just downstream of his boots is about a 2-3 foot vertical drop where the erosion has removed all of the native material and has left that concrete apron exposed. It could potentially be undermined. So our project will extend through this crossing all the way down to Turtle Creek Boulevard. And then finally, as we approach the end of the project, this photo is looking back upstream. Again, you could see where the stream bottom may have been, and then now where it is today. And all those exposed roots along the edge of the stream bank are evidence of how much the stream bed has lowered itself, and there's no habitat or for places for little critters to hide when flood flows start going through this place. Now we're going to switch down to Stastny, and I advise you to buckle your seatbelts because the ride is going to get a little bumpy here because we have even more of a drastic change in our stream corridor. And right on the left is the auto zone, and you can see that in this photo, which is taken right at the road crossing apron, the concrete apron right by the culverts there. And that gentleman's about a couple feet below that. So the floodwaters have eroded and removed the native material from the channel bed and now has exposed the concrete apron. So our project starts right at that concrete apron and will extend downstream a couple hundred feet. What I want you to pay attention to is the distance between the gentleman's hat and the top of bank. It's probably a couple feet, vertical distance between the two. And then as we move downstream, you can see what happens in an urbanized watershed is that the channel bottom has dropped dramatically. And now instead of a couple feet from that gentleman's hat, we're looking at probably 10 to 11 feet of how much material has been removed from the stream bed. And all of those exposed stream banks now will be a source of water quality pollution and also obviously loss of habitat where no critters can really hide during higher water events. And that dramatic lowering of the channel bed has obviously undermined trees, which are now prone to falling in, and very oversteepened banks where they're near cliffs where there's a lot of instability that are sources for water quality pollution. Again, another exposed area down through this reach, which is a pretty consistent indicator of instability, erosion, and water quality pollution problems. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Clayton to kind of take us through the end of the presentation.
Great. Thank you, George, for giving us that creek tour. Yeah, so that was a great overview of, what the problem looks like. We expected that there probably hadn't been a lot of folks who had, walked down that creek, maybe a couple of curious folks who live in the area. But I want to take this opportunity now to talk about, moving forward and it's our budget and kind of a schedule. So, as we mentioned, right now we're, entering into the final design phase. We're at about 30% completion of, having our final design. You can see the timeline on the bottom there. Right now, we're a little bit past. We're in September 2021. We're gonna, by the end of the fall, we're hoping to make some more progress, deal with some, real estate issues in terms of getting all the appropriate easements we need to build our project. There are already easements on most of this channel, but there's some small areas where we'll need to acquire additional easement. And yeah, by the springtime, we hope to have a finalized plan. And then hopefully by, summertime, maybe fall, depending on how everything goes next year, we'll be breaking ground for construction. And we are planning to have another opportunity to, meet with the neighborhood, probably once we have selected the contractor, before we, go to construction, to give everyone a really good idea of, what that's going to look like. But for right now, this is where we're at. And as far as budget goes, the project's budgeted to be about a $4 million project in total. And that includes the design and construction for both of these two sites at Eberhardt and at Stastny. And yeah, in case you were curious, that's funded through a combination of a bond that was, passed in 2018, the drainage bond, and also your drainage charge that you pay on your utility bills based on your impervious cover on your property. So with that, I think it's time, just if anyone had any questions, I'd definitely be available to help answer any questions y'all may have.
Let me just jump in here for a moment. Because it's such a small group, I think if you have questions, you can just unmute yourself and speak up. You can also put it in the chat if you're not comfortable, speaking in front of a big group. We'll keep an eye on that and read out any questions we see in the chat. And there's also an option to raise your hand, and I think we'll be fine. But if we start to have issues with people like talking over each other, we might ask people to just raise their hand before speaking. But for right now, I think we're such a small group that you can please feel free to just speak up if you have questions.
So when exactly do you think that this project would start being come to fruition?
Yeah, so we're anticipating maybe summer or fall next year, 2022.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, so we're still a ways off.
Well, like I said, we live in the neighborhood, and we I don't actually walk down the creek, but I'm very familiar with what we were looking at. And I just have to say that I'm very glad that that this problem is being addressed, because it's not good to have that water just rushing through there when it rains really hard. And we have critters and stuff. I worry about the habitat, the wildlife and stuff like that. That's still, we have possums and raccoons that live in my backyard.
Mine too. Yep.
So even though we're urban, we're still sort of rural. So so I'm just glad that you're going to take all that into consideration, and it's not just going to be a concrete drainage ditch. Absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely take a holistic approach, try to maximize multiple objectives in terms of the stability, the ecosystem benefits that a diverse and thriving community, of native plants, trees, and can provide. That's an amenity for a neighborhood.
So is there that we can do as residents of the neighborhood? Is there anything that we can do to help facilitate this?
Well, that's a great question. I guess I would say you know, you could just be conscious of what's happening on your property.
Yeah.
Would be one place to start. Start where you are. If you don't live on the bank of a drainage channel, there's maybe a little bit less that you could do. But even if you don't, there's things you can do on your property to make incremental improvements to how the overall watershed is behaving. We have a pilot project going on up actually in the part of the Waller Creek watershed. And what they're trying to get folks to do there is to build small scale rain gardens on their properties. If you're not familiar with what a rain garden is, it's like a small depression that kind of can catch a little bit of rain when it falls and hold it there for a bit to kind of encourage it to kind of infiltrate more than if it was just, a flat lawn or, not a depressed area. So they're trying to get, in that pilot project, they're trying to get a lot of people in the neighborhood to do these rain gardens on their residential properties to see, because it's the kind of thing that if one person does it, it's not going to make a difference. But if everyone in the whole neighborhood does it, you might start to see something at a watershed scale acting differently. So that's one thing I can think of. But our department has resources for native plants that you can learn about. The Grow Green Guide is a resource that you could find on our department or the City of Austin website if you haven't heard of that before. What else? If you see a pollution spill happening, like you see someone dumping oil or something like that, you can call. We have a spills hotline that you can call. And if you're curious, I could drop that number into the chat. And we have in our department, we have a separate team of folks whose job it is to go out and investigate. Basically, they're first responders for pollution spills. So that's just a few things I can think of that maybe if you wanted to get involved or learn more, you could explore.
So do you have like a kind of like an adopt a creek thing where we could go and, clean up trash and stuff periodically? I mean, that one picture of the creek with all the bottom and stuff made me so sad.
I know, it makes me sad too. Stephanie, do you know about Adopt a Creek programs? That sounds so familiar.
So Keep Austin Beautiful has a program, or at least they used to have a program for Adopt a Creek that Watershed Protection worked with them on. So I think that program is still active, but it was kind of a joint project between Watershed Protection and Keep Austin Beautiful. And I think, the volunteers would clean up the trash, and then we would help supply the tools that are needed and then take away the trash that was collected. So I will look around in a moment and on the website and see if I see a good link for that. I did want to jump in and say we have had a question come up in the chat as well. Is there a plan to save the trees and plants along the easement?
That's a great question, Chris. Like we mentioned in the presentation, we are doing this in part to create a diverse, natural, thriving environment. There are some trees that I think they've been so damaged by the erosion, undermining their root systems, that there will be trees we will need to remove as part of the project to build a truly stable slope within the space that we have. But especially if the trees are larger or of a more desirable species, where it's a high priority to protect them. And we actually walked the whole project site last week with the city arborist, who we were going through every tree in the creek to determine what needed to be done, and identifying the high value species there that we're going to make it a priority to protect. Change our design to whatever we need to do, because there are some really nice trees. Like we were walking through, and there's some heritage pecan trees in the Eberhardt Reach that are very close to, in folks' backyards, but close enough to the channel where we'll need to consider them. And some other nicer trees downstream, and that at the Stastny site too. There's some big old trees that. So I guess in short, I can't promise that we'll save all the trees, because there's definitely some that we will have to remove because of their damaged condition. They could present a hazard, because of their condition. or they're small and they've been undermined by erosion, and we'll need to remove them to do our project. So I guess it's a mix, but I just want to let you know it's our priority to preserve the good trees in that reach, and we will be planting new trees after the project is done as part of our landscaping restoration. So, I think it's going to be nice. It's going to be really nice, I think, when it's all done, especially as it evolves over the following years. I think it's going to be a much nicer and stable and hopefully a thriving environment. Yeah, it's an important
I
question.
just saw the link to so thank you for that. I appreciate that, because I was thinking, it'd be a good project for the neighborhood if we could get our neighborhood together.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a great way to bring some people together.
But we could get, I think a lot of the neighbors might be interested in,
Well, especially the people that live right along it.
yeah, right. The ones that live on Middleham that are back right up to the creek. So that would be good because, if we all do a little bit, it'll, end up to be a lot. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'll just add, Friesen Nichols has participated in that, and Stephanie's right. The city will provide trash bags, equipment, all that. It's really great, easy to do. Hardest part is just getting a few friends to join you on a Saturday morning or whatever day you do it.
Okay. Well, we have the city worked on, we have a little pocket park in our neighborhood, Armadillo Park. And I know those people are they're really good about getting together and doing work in the park. So I could probably tap those people to help with the creek project.
Well, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And just, be careful, because as you saw, it was
yeah, no,
footing.
I'm not gonna risk my life for this, but I do appreciate getting better and finding out about this Zoom meeting, because it's been very helpful. I just found out that if you keep abreast of what's going on, when change happens, it's not so scary.
Yeah, and please let your neighbors know if you see them. I know it's kind of a small group here tonight, which is fine, but we have a website at the bottom of this slide that we'll be posting updates there as far as schedule. We'll post the recording of this meeting there so folks can access it later on, and that'll be kind of like the good place to go for updates on the project. And on this slide as well as on the website is our contact information if you have questions that come up later on. So are there any other questions anyone has?
Clayton, hey, this is Holly. I just want to echo on Stephanie's request that anyone that, if a cleanup is planned by any neighborhood associations, that they, exercise caution, because it can be dangerous. Some of the footing, or it could be easy to lose your footing, as George noted in his presentation. But one thing I also wanted to remind everyone, which surprised me when I was visiting the creek for the first time, is that there is poison ivy and poison oak in the area. So you just want to be aware of that if you end up making a visit to the creek.
Yeah. When we did the Armadillo Park, there was a lot of that there too. And some woman brought in goats. I think goats like to eat poison ivy. And so they brought goats in to eat the poison. Yeah. And the goats, goats love it. Evidently, it's a delicacy for goats. And so she brought like 3 or 4 goats, and they got after it and they ate the poison ivy. So, wow, just saying, there's a tip.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a good strategy.
Great to know.
And it's totally natural.
Yeah. This will be a mini wild space. Yeah, so it's not going to be made to be easily accessed necessarily. So that's a good reminder, Hobby. Well, yeah, if there's no other questions, I guess we can wrap the meeting up. Stephanie, do you want to say anything else before we close it?
I just want to thank y'all for coming tonight and being open to the project. I always love it when the questions we get are, how can I help? That's really wonderful to hear. So yeah, thank you. And yeah, we'll be back in touch when we're farther along in the project. And yeah, probably about when we're ready to start construction. So.
Yeah, I think we'll want to come back when we have like a start date and the contractor who can tell you like what the hours will be and all that kind of details that you're probably curious about.
Okay, well, just keep us posted. I'm anxious to see how this all progresses. So thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
All right.
So, for let me put my email here in the chat for everyone if they want to catch it. It's always helpful for us. Like when we do a meeting that's in person, we always have a sign-in sheet where we can, get contact information. And we haven't figured out quite the best way to do that for virtual meetings. But, if you do grab my email there, and then just send me your emails, that can help us know, who's interested in the project and help us, keep people aware. And it's stephanie.lott@austintexas.gov.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you everyone who came to participate, and thanks to Jay and George and Avi and Stephanie. The project team has been really great. If anyone has any questions, definitely email Stephanie or myself or Javi, and otherwise check out the website for updates.